Welcome to another episode of the Hustle Wing podcast. Today I am joined by Terence from DreamFactory. How are you doing, Terence?
I'm really good. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, for folks at home who might not be familiar with DreamFactory and the work that you guys do, could you maybe give us a little bit of that origin story and some of the work that you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dream Factory is an open source tool, it's core open source, right? So the core offering is available on GitHub, but we're an API generation tool that allows for the automation of internal APIs, kind of like DevOps automation for Docker or for infrastructure as code. This is for your internal API infrastructure. And so we can map a database schema straight to an API and give you a working API essentially in seconds. You assign what roles you want, API keys, and you're off and running. And so we see everyone from startups using Dream Factory to maybe they want to build a product without building on Airtable or a no code tool, and they want a robust API to go along with it. And then we see large enterprises using Dream Factory to actually automate their whole sort of backend internal API API infrastructure.
Sure. A lot of, these similar sort of solutions and platforms have sort of almost transformed the way we understand how operations work and how businesses work. I'm interested in how you sort of, or at least what goes behind the creation process around this specific solution. So what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it always starts with a problem. In this case, Dream Factory was really built to solve the Salesforce integration problem, and this is kind of years ago. And Salesforce, a lot of people don't realize, was at the very forefront of REST APIs back in 2000. Some of the first really readily available public APIs came from Salesforce. But customers have always had this problem of getting data into Salesforce. There's all sorts of different types of connectors, but but what originally we built was a way to just connect to any data source, any database, and serve that data out via API. And what we got was this kind of omni, connector, this kind of platform that can connect to anything and serve it out via this generic kind of generic being like readily accepted and standardized REST API. And then on top of that, we built a bunch of enterprise security features around rate limiting and authentication. Obviously, the roles and keys. And so it's been interesting to see where it went. But like any product, it started with a sticky problem that we needed a solution to.
Mm. And I was reading up and I did see that you, as you mentioned, sort of originated, from around that sales force focused product to help administration. I'm interested in how, what kind of, how do I phrase this? What kind of sort of products do you guys specifically design for small businesses? Because I can imagine that it's not as broad, and I don't think also in terms of affordability. Of course, small businesses struggle a lot with issues around financing specific solutions. So I'm interested in that relationship and how that looks like. I know it's a mouthful of a question. It's a bit here and there, vague, but I think you kind of catch my drift.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So for us, being open source is a really, really important part of our identity. And so anyone can download Dream Factory's core offering, which works with Postgres, which is a free database, and get it set up within a few minutes and be off and running. We've really developed Dream Factory to be available as open source for startups, right? And Postgres is a really common database because it is open source because it's free. Um, and then the more sort of like enterprise type connectors, like your SAP or Microsoft SQL Server, and some of those sort of enterprise features are paid for. So we try and kind of strike that balance. We're available and we're for the startups, right? For those kind of solopreneurs, but then also we can continue to kind of fund the company and pay to maintain the product.
Sure. For a product like this, I'm sure that there are quite a lot of variables that are involved in building it. I mean, you sort of touched on a few earlier on. Our audience here at Hustle Wing, is mostly side hustlers and contract workers. What kind of projects or even challenges that you guys have that you could see yourselves leveraging some contract work from some of our network?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big user of the gig workers, if you will, via like Fiverr and tools like that for small projects. But then on like a bigger sort of kind of larger project basis, we actually are looking to hire a sort of like a hybrid engineer who can both be customer facing and work directly with our customers in APAC, but also has a breadth of knowledge and expertise in PHP and can kind of jump into the code and solve problems there when needed. So it's actually sort of great timing to be on here because we are looking to hire that person, and we're really flexible about what that looks like, hours, location, everything. Really, just we're just kind of looking for the right fit, right person who can jump into the team and add value.
Mm. I'm interested in your views around the future of automation. I mean, a lot of businesses, since, the emergence of digital technologies, have sort of incorporated and integrated different models and methods of using technological components with their business offering. When you look at, operations and scaling, and when you think about the solution that you have in automation, what does that look like in the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think everyone's kind of thinking about things are moving really quickly. Companies that remain static and don't adapt, don't change, fail. And the fact is, it's the same case with workers, right? With all of us, we have to continue to look over the horizon and ask, where are things going? Where can I add more value to an organization? Um, I previous to this company, I was running operations, um, both at DreamFactory and then another company. Before that, I was at Google, and I, as an administrative business partner, essentially an EA. My first job at Google was as EA. I was writing Google App scripts to try to automate some of my work and just free up my time so I could do what I viewed as more value added work. And so, I don't believe everyone is a developer or wants to be a developer, but tools like ChatGPT can really empower you to ask, not just ask the question of like, how can I do this better? How can I automate this work? But actually execute on that and be able to build prototypes and start kind of implementing them. So, it's a very uncomfortable reality we live in, but just, this sort of like, like it or not, the open market of kind of like the modern economy means that we all have to be constantly striving to kind of figure out what's next and try and position ourselves in the best place possible. And you see people rise very rapidly through organizations who can do that effectively, and unfortunately, those who can't sometimes get shown the door. And so I didn't build this system, but I am trying to do my best to to make it work. Right.
Yeah. Speaking of what's next, what should we be on the lookout for coming up from your side?
Well, I'm really excited about some stuff we're doing with generative AI. Dream Factory, as I've said, allows you to very quickly create APIs, generate APIs, and it turns out that LLMs, these generative AI models, are really good at looking at an API schema and with a little bit of advice and kind of guidance of what the different endpoints do, can actually fetch data from those APIs and make use of them within the model. And so, just like we've got public OpenAI has these like public plugins that are actually APIs in the back end. I believe we're going to start to see the rise of private plugins via private APIs. And so, in existing prompt engineering platforms, that there's one that we're working with called Ask Sage AI, but there's a bunch of others. That Google has one, AWS, Azure, kind of like um, I'm blanking on the name, but you can Google these and find them. You're going to be able to ingest an API, a private API, add a framework around it via prompt engineering, and be able to interact with that API in a really powerful way.
Mm. For folks who are interested in connecting, where can they find you online?
I'm really only on LinkedIn. Social media is kind of it could be a full time job if you're not careful. So I am on LinkedIn, and then otherwise you can find me at DreamFactory.com. Feel free to reach out if you want to chat or want to learn more about what we're doing.
Sure. Thank you so much, Terence, for your time.